Welcome back to Podcast Bozo, where the three Bozos teach each other new things, talk with guests, and rib tickle each other each week. Today, I'm talking with former representative of Illinois' 8th District and 2020 presidential candidate Joe Walsh. I'm your host, JJ. I'm here alone today. We're missing Cheek and Eli. They're out sick and working. Before we put the pedal to the metal, we want to encourage you to contribute to the conversation, communicate with us over the social medias or our website. You can find us at podcastbozo.com or at podcastbozo. Speaking of our website, go there, donate. We'll reach out with whatever you write in the donation message, or we'll write you a little backstory. Not sure what that means. Donate to find out. Plus, that money all goes back into the production and distribution of this podcast. Thank you. That's all that stuff. Joe, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, JJ, it's really good to be with you, man. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. And everything I've heard about you is you're a nice guy, and I'm excited to talk. I don't know.
Cool.
Tell me, we have someone named Adele Naz coming on later, like 6 weeks down the road. And she called just to get a scope of what the podcast was like before coming on or anything like that. And she said, "Oh, Joe's a nice guy." And I didn't know if that meant she knew of you and had just follow you, or if you knew each other, but that, I don't know. I thought I'd throw that name out there, see if you guys had any connection.
JJ, I don't think I know her. I could. I'm lousy with names.
You're a politician, Joe.
Yeah, I know. I sucked at that, JJ. I really sucked at it.
At being a politician? Names?
It's a great skill to have. I'm blown away by people like Bill Clinton was this way. Kevin McCarthy, who's a piece of shit, he was this way, though. He remembered he can remember everybody's name. I was always bad at that.
A buddy of mine mine's dad always really harped on the idea of, if you could just remember one small thing about every person you meet and be able to regurgitate it the next time you see them, it'll make a lifelong impression. And one of those things being their name if you've only met them one time. And I'm equally as bad, and I wish I was good. I don't know how do people do it. I don't have any memorization techniques, if anyone out there has any.
We all got our skills, man. That's not mine.
Yeah. What are your skills, Joe?
JJ, that's a great question. I think one skill I have is I'm honest to a fault, which is probably part of why I didn't last in electoral politics very long.
That's fair.
Didn't know how to lie very well.
Yeah, that's an issue, huh? It chews up people who tell the truth, and and one thing that I don't necessarily want to get into right away, but I've noticed you've changed your positioning in your politics, moving into your election, and your stance on the big guy Trump, and I appreciate what I'm trying to get at is that I appreciated your honesty in moving forward from things you had said, and we're all growing, and I think a big thing that. Obviously, we're a more left-leaning podcast, and I don't even like the idea of those ideologies in the first place. And I think that you'd probably agree with that. Not to put any words in your mouth, but yeah, I kind of forget where I was going with that. But all in all, I think you seem like a guy who does appreciate honesty, and it does at least appreciate apologizing for your mistakes. And
JJ, it's what I hated most about politics. It's what I still hate most about politics is politicians are trained not to be honest, not to be direct. I'm sitting here with you, and I have no idea what you're going to ask me, but politicians are trained. They need to know what the questions are going to be, and then they're trained on how not to answer questions. I have a lot of fun. I could never do that. I have a lot of fun just answering questions directly. A lot of politicians do tend to lie. We've never in our lives seen anything like Trump, though. We've never had that, JJ. That son of a bitch lied every time he opened his mouth. We've never had that.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't even know. The whole country has done this to some extent, right and left. It's just trying to fathom what is going on with that situation, and whether some people agreed with him or rallied behind him, and it really brought out an issue in politics where voted politicians are treated as like mascots or teams rather than and I feel comfortable saying that around you because the pinned Twitter post on your profile, the first thing I saw that was like, I think we could talk to this guy is that you're about the country and the policies, not necessarily like not the person ahead.
Hey, JJ, I think one thing that's helpful is to try to understand why the hell. I mean, you and I would agree that Donald Trump is a horrible human being. How did he ever become president? And I think if the country can understand that, all of us, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, I think it will be really helpful because we don't want it to happen again. I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into this. I think our politics is broken. And I think that's what helped put him in the White House. Yeah.
Yeah. And we will get into that, I hope. And there's no outline for this episode. I don't do that. Not organized enough. But I want to go back to one thing you were talking about and like how politicians are trained. And I'm sure you kind of get into that system. And I was something that triggered in my mind when you said that is there first of all, is the Walsh family out of politics? Because your wife was also a state representative, right? And I think she's out of the biz too. Are you done? Is that the end of the Walsh family?
Well, she is, JJ. She got appointed as an Illinois state rep because the sitting state rep had a little bit of a scandal. But we live in suburban northern Illinois, and like everywhere else around the country, she lost in 2018 because Republicans lost the suburbs because of Trump. People always ask me what I'm going to do next. I was a congressman. I ran for president. I have no fucking clue. I don't know. I'm not a Republican anymore. I left the Republican Party a year ago. I respect the hell out of the Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. So I'm kind of homeless now, and I don't know what my next move, if there is a next move for me, will be.
Fair enough. But you at least have your positioning, which is a start to a next move if there was going to be one. You what pushed you out of being a Republican then?
The party became a cult. I didn't want to belong to a cult. Plain and simple. I remember, JJ, I went on CNN about a year ago when I got out of the presidential campaign, and that's exactly what I said. The CNN guy asked me the same question you just asked me. Why are you leaving? Because it became a cult. It is a cult. I mean, look, and we can talk about issues. I generally am pretty libertarian. I believe in freedom and limited government. The Republican Party has always been closer to that. I'm older than you for most of my life. Yeah. But the Republican Party said, fuck it. They stopped believing in ideas once Trump came on the scene. And now it's all about just worshiping that man. And JJ, we're still seeing it now.
Yeah, which is weird. It's he's controlling us from the grave in a way, you know. He's going to
run again, JJ. He will.
Don't say that, Joe. Yeah. I don't think anyone wants that. Well, obviously some people want it. But yeah, that's a nightmare for another day, I guess. But I thought one thing that I was browsing through articles about you, as I do, trying to do as I can. Did you start your career path, vague term, as a social worker?
Yeah, I was kind of all over the map, JJ. I've always loved politics. I got married young. My first marriage had kids right away. So I got into social work and education reform. I spent a lot of years on the south side of the city working with mostly low income Black young men and women, helping them get their GED and basic job training. I've always been interested in that. I have a policy background I don't talk about as much as I should. But yeah, and I did some teaching. I've taught American government and American history, and I finally just winded my way to politics.
Yeah. And the way you talk about political career is as if it finds you and you don't necessarily find it. Is that the truth?
Well, with some of us. Again,
well, the honest ones, maybe. Yeah.
Well, somebody like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has told people that when he was in 8th grade, he wanted to run for president. there are some people like that, Republican and Democrat, who are, and every move they make is calculated. No, I fucking have things I believed in. I had things I wanted to do. And if it led to a political career, it led to a political career. I ran for Congress in 2010 because I got really pissed off at the direction of the country. So I said, the hell with it. I'm going to run. Sure.
Fair enough. And you're someone who represents ideas more than the parties, like we've talked about. So that's a little more what makes a leader in my mind. We've talked about that in other episodes too. When we don't have a guest on, I guess I should give you a little more context. When we don't have a guest on, we talk about more philosophical ideas, and we like one of us will learn very in depth one of those things and teach it to the other ones of us. It's kind of a weird
JJ,
format.
by the way, most politicians aren't like that, Republican and Democrat. Most politicians I've found, like, they want to be a congressman or they want to be a governor or president because they want to be something. They want the power. They want to make a difference, whatever. Very few politicians run for office because they want to do something. Like, I want to cut taxes, or I want universal health care. Somebody like AOC, I respect. Bernie Sanders, I love. He's an unusual politician because his whole career, he's wanted to do things, not be something, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that kind of brings up an interesting point that always toils around in my head is sometimes it comes off as unauthentic to change your politics as you progress through being a politician. My take on that is if you're listening to your voter base and executing on what your voter base agrees on, then it can't be that bad, because isn't that your job in the first place? And it means you're listening. But on the other hand, there's a Bernie Sanders who's just seems tried and true for his whole career, and that works out well too. But maybe that's just my bias in me believing more in Bernie's message than other people. But what's your take on that?
No, I think, look, I think Bernie's always had a core set of beliefs, like I have. I haven't changed my core set of beliefs. Bernie is a progressive. I am a libertarian / a little bit of a conservative. My core beliefs haven't changed. I mean, 10 years ago and now with Trump, I really haven't changed my beliefs. I've evolved on some issues like climate change. If you and I were having this conversation 5 years ago, I probably would have been much more resistant to the idea of man's impact on the climate. I studied, I learned, I listened to people. Now I get it. So there are some issues like that where I've opened my eyes, even at my age. But generally, I have a core. Bernie's got a core. And I don't trust politicians who change their core beliefs.
That makes sense. So there's a difference for you between the surface level learned things, and I did notice that you had taken a new stance on climate change, which I think is interesting. I mean, that definitely, I'm not the only one who would be a little rubbernecked at the fact that someone who was formerly a Republican all of a sudden is now acknowledging climate change. And it's another thing to respect about you, I guess, in that regard, is that you are willing to change. And that's something that, and change doesn't always mean, I think a lot of people think change means going in the direction that you agree with, or the eye of the beholder they agree with, and if someone's listening to science or something and they're changing and they're being flexible with something outside of their core beliefs, I think that's because a core belief is to be.
JJ.
Yeah,
you're right. And there are a number of issues where I've learned, listened, and evolved a little bit. But if I all of a sudden next month became a progressive, then I wouldn't believe myself. Because I have a core set of beliefs. I believe in the free market. I believe in, limited government. But yeah, I've definitely changed on some of the issues on the margins. Absolutely.
Has that ever happened? Has anyone ever gone from being on the right, medium right to medium left? Has that large of a shift ever happened in your observable at a higher level of politics, I guess?
That's a great question. I know high level people who've switched parties. but they've generally been kind of a very moderate Republican, and they
Yeah.
became a moderate Democrat.
Mhm.
But I've never seen a conservative become a progressive or a progressive become a conservative. That would like be mind blowing.
Yeah.
Now I've seen people like on the issue of abortion. To me, you can't change overnight on abortion.
Mhm.
Mitt Romney was always pro life, pro life, pro life, or excuse me, he was always pro choice, and then he decided to run for president, and like
Mhm.
overnight he became pro life. That kind of thing to me isn't believable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And if anyone's paying it, I mean, that's just a last minute shift to try to pick up a couple votes, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, just being, you realize where you're positioning. A lot of it is, so much of it is marketing. And my main job is marketing. So it's funny to see like politicians position themselves as brands in a way, or not just in a way, but very largely as a brand. Which plays into that voter base thing. I don't know. I'm very conflicted
Well,
on
that's
that
a
whole
good
idea.
point, JJ. That's really
Yeah.
kind of what a campaign is, isn't it?
Well,
A
yeah, I
marketing
guess so.
exercise.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm going to stereotype Republicans here for a second, only to juxtapose your position in that light. Being a social worker and working on the ground and understanding, like you said, you worked with impoverished populations and we're actually trying to initiate change in those areas. And then my perception or my stereotype, I know there's very big differences between every Republican and all that, but the stereotype of a Republican is that they care more about the money first and capitalism, and that if you're down and out, then it's your fault because you didn't work hard enough. How do you balance those two ideas? My gross generalization and the idea of your understanding of that.
Yeah, and JJ, there's some truth to your gross generalization because I know some Republicans who think that way. But generally, I look at it like this, and this is why I was a Republican social worker. We got problems in the country, and I generally don't look toward government, especially the federal government, as my first default to address those problems. So philosophically, for me, urban poverty, young black men and women dropping out of high school in Chicago, that's a big problem. It fit with my conservative philosophy for me to go down there and volunteer, or me to go down there and work at a nonprofit instead of having the federal government do something about it. So I always looked at it like that. But I do think if I was going to put a good spin on Republicans, yeah, they care as much about urban poverty. They just don't think it's Washington's job to fix. State and local governments and charities and nonprofits and churches. Now that's not always workable, but that would be the best way to spin it.
Yeah, and that is true. That would be. I agree that one of the biggest issues the country has is that we just don't agree on anything, and there is a sense of giving the centralized government more power makes it more homogenized, or like the ideas that the government represents is more homogenized, which is not representative of the entire population. I can agree with that. My flip side of that, just to represent what I don't think I'm the only one with this idea, is that what if there's not enough people being activated to support their ideas? And I think it's true that there are underrepresented populations and they aren't being more represented. And I think it's an issue with there has to be a balance somewhere. And I know my father's a libertarian. He says the same exact things you say in this regard specifically. And we've had these discussions before. And it's a matter of like, he's like, I don't trust my money with the government. And I get that because they're not very efficient, but the government is the only one that has the power to aggregate that much money to put towards a cause. And I don't know.
JJ,
I think
this is the eternal American struggle. When you look back at our founders, I mean, I could argue more easily that libertarian principles founded this country. we've moved well beyond that, I'll acknowledge. And my libertarian philosophy now, JJ, I'm in the minority, man. More Americans agree with you. When you look at the history of this country, last couple hundred years, we are definitely moving in a more bigger government, more activist government America. And I don't see that changing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And no matter what, there's always going to be almost half the population that doesn't agree with wherever this government goes. So as it goes towards a more activist government, you have the whole, the other half that's kind of forming these new policies that kind of counteract that.
And I would add this, JJ, the thing that fucking pisses me off about Republicans is a lot of what they say is bullshit. Like I learned that, I knew that, but when I went to Congress, I saw it firsthand. Republicans don't care about small or limited government. They believe in big government like the Democrats do. They just believe in their big government, like big defense and all the rest. So right. We don't really have a party that is really a limited government party, which is why we're where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I am curious as to how many people do you notice shifting out of the Republican mindset in the capacity that you did? I got to imagine a lot of people are in that you don't notice. Like you've been out of Congress for a little bit, but you're positioning yourself away from that. Do you have circles that are also doing that kind of thing? You're saying, "Ooh, I don't know about this."
Yeah, again, because of Trump. So everything's changed because of Trump. Before Trump came along, JJ, I was the crazy Tea Party congressman. And you were defined in the Republican Party. You were either a conservative or you were like a squishy rhino moderate Republican. Well, then Trump comes along, and now it doesn't matter where you are on the issues. You either stand with Trump or you don't. I'm still a conservative. I don't stand with him. So there's no room in the Republican Party for me. So there are a lot of moderate Republicans and conservatives like me who don't want Trump or Trumpism. They've left the Republican Party. The Republican Party right now, JJ, is as small as it's ever been. What are we going to do? That's the $1 million question.
Yeah. The issue is that in terms of like a voter base, your ideals are now split where and less unified. So it's kind of an interesting situation. Hopefully, what do you think about a more prominent multi-party system?
Give it to me, baby. JJ, yeah? Give it to me, man. Absolutely. I understand our system is biased toward a two-party system. Mm-hmm. But look, again, we said it a few minutes ago. I think our politics is broken. That's how come a guy like Trump got elected. I think both political parties, Democrat and Republican, are broken. Washington, D.C., I know is broken. The way we elect a president is broken. JJ, I'm a conservative, but I'd get rid of the Electoral College tomorrow. The way we vote for people is broken. We need major reforms, and one of them would be like ranked choice voting. We need a vibrant third party. I'd love it if we had 4 parties.
Have you? I'm actually blanking on the term now, but it's a system. I think it's called it's like next vote up or whatever. That's the gist of it. It's like the whole idea is that everyone votes for their first, second, third, fourth, fifth
ranked choice
favorite
voting.
Ranked choice voting. There you go.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on that?
It's a great idea. It's being tried now in a couple states. It needs to grow. It's no surprise, JJ, that both political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, are generally fighting against reforms like this. Because a reform like that, JJ, would make it a lot easier for somebody from another party to get on the ballot and to actually win. Both parties over the years have developed rules to make it really hard for anybody to break into that duopoly. Democrats have done this just like Republicans have. They don't want there to be a viable third party. But I think we're at one of those weird moments in American history where there's like revolutionary change going on.
Yeah, I'd hope so. I think one of its other biggest issue is it's more complicated. and it could easily be twisted to, I could see how rhetoric could make it villainize it and say it's not a good idea. It's not as easy. It's going to confuse people. There's going to be more false votes and things like that. I could see a way that people who want to push against it will push against it. I don't see a downside with it personally, but I do see that, like, since it is a slightly more complicated idea, it could be harder to push through. And
a lot of this is money. And I think what you're going to see, JJ, over the next couple of cycles, you're going to see well-known people with money kind of say fuck it to both these political parties and put a lot of money behind people to run as independents. In 2024, you may see a really well-known celebrity type run as an independent.
Yeah. And even if they don't win, just bringing respect to that third party will be a substantial thing. Who's going to run for it? Is it The Rock? Is it Matthew McConaughey? That's who I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And see, but here's the funny thing. So you get a guy like The Rock, JJ. The Rock is built on everybody loving him. Well, once you get into politics and where do you stand on immigration, abortion, and guns? And all of a sudden, The Rock is going to find, oh my God, half of America doesn't like me. Actors and celebrities don't like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's murky water. You got to get a more controversial celebrity in there then, huh? Can't think of one right now.
Or somebody. Again, Trump's a horrible human being, but somebody like a Trump who doesn't mind all the shit that's going to be thrown your way, and
who can just ignore it. That's a good point. So
it's hard.
That brings me to one of my could be tougher questions. I don't know. You formally supported Trump, right? And first of all, let me ask the question and then tell me if I'm wrong with my assumptions.
JJ? Is that what you're going to ask?
That's the question. And I'm sure you've been asked it before, but I got to know.
So here's the truth. So in 2016, Trump's running for president. I'm on the radio all over the country. I'm on Fox News every day. I didn't take him seriously at first. In that Republican primary, JJ, I didn't vote for him. I voted for Rand Paul. Trump blocked me on Twitter in the 2016 campaign because I would criticize him. Once he became the Republican nominee, I said, okay, it's him or it's Hillary. Hillary sucked. I mean, she was a horrible candidate. And the other thing about me, JJ, is I'm not an original never Trumper. The people who voted for Trump voted for me. These were the people who listened to me on the radio every night. I understood why they supported Trump. Like remember when Trump used to say, I'm going to drain the swamp and we're going to blow up DC? Again, I got that. To me, when he was saying it was all bullshit, but I really believed that our political system needed disruption. So I voted for him because he wasn't Hillary. But I made a big mistake, JJ, in 2016. I didn't pay enough attention to who he was. I should have paid more attention to what a corrupt, dishonest, bad person he was. And if I'd have known that then, I wouldn't have voted for him. That's bad on me.
So voting on Trump out of this ideal of kind of breaking apart this conglomerate we have, I guess.
Blow it up, man. Blow it up.
Who's the ideal candidate then? Who's the person that you wanted Trump to be? What does he look like? Well,
you mean like I in 2016, man, I thought we needed a disruptor. Hillary wasn't a disruptor. Hillary was the poster child for an establishment politician. And JJ, I'll tell you what, man, and I think you will probably agree with me. If Bernie Sanders had been the Democratic nominee in 2016, he beats Trump. I think in 2016, because Bernie was a disruptor, is a disruptor, and he's not a horrible guy like Trump. So, and Trump won the nomination, and then he beat Hillary because he was a disruptor, and people didn't sufficiently understand all of his bullshit and all of his corruption. But a lot of the American people 5 years ago, JJ, they wanted somebody to blow it up.
Yeah, I get that. I get it was, and I mean, honestly, Joe Biden being the reaction to Trump is back to that Hillary candidate. Like, he's very establishment. He's very mainline. He's I don't know. To me, he seems pretty carbon copy to what Hillary was too.
Well, but you're a marketing guy, my friend, and maybe there's a male-female thing going on here, but you're right about what you say about Biden. The big difference is Joe Biden's a likable cat. I mean, people like him. He's a nice, likable guy. Hillary had a fatal flaw, unlike her husband. Her husband, Bill Clinton, was dynamic. Everybody loved him. Hillary Clinton is a very unlikable personality. It's too bad because she's a really smart person. But she just, it's hard. It's like on our side, Republicans have Ted Cruz. He's just an unlikable son of a bitch. And he'll never get over that. Never.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not sure if I agree with I didn't ever not like Hillary for some she seemed, the reasons I didn't like her are the same reasons that I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden either. It's just that they're both very politicky. And that's tough for me. I think gender might have played a big role with Hillary, and it's kind of shitty to say, but like the country wasn't ready for a woman president, and it sucks that it takes conditioning for a country to get there. But hopefully Kamala is a stepping stone for that, and there are these like, unfortunately, we have these like token steps that we take as a country to say like, now we had that, now we got that out of the way, now we can move on to the next step. Unfortunately, that's the truth. And maybe if there was ever going to be a silver lining of Trump, maybe it's that we have that precedent for someone from the outside to come in. And if there was ever going to be that kind of silver lining, maybe that's his, other than the bad marks in the sand that he left, maybe that's his good one.
And JJ, I'd say Trump's other good one is he woke the American people up. He was so bad that people who were not involved and did not vote, young people especially, people came out. He got people out to vote against him, but he woke people up and got people involved.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Even good and bad people. But yeah. So to switch up the questioning right now, I noticed that Joe Walsh did not support you in your presidential candidate run. And I'm wondering if it hurts you deeply to not have the Walsh vote, the universal Walsh vote.
It kind of did, JJ. And when I ran for re-election to Congress in 2012, Joe Walsh actually campaigned for my opponent, Tammy Duckworth. And he went after me and he filmed some commercials against me. It kind of bummed me out because I'm a big fan of Joe Walsh and the Eagles.
Yeah, that's weird how something like politics can really turn. I bet you have some supporters that maybe like Joe Walsh less because of that. Not that you should, but like I think that's probably the case.
I probably got some votes. People probably voted for me thinking they were voting for the other guy.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to explain who you were when we release this episode. We're just going to say Joe Walsh and leave it up to everyone's imagination.
JJ, you'll probably get more people who will say, Eagles, man.
Yeah, the Eagles. Well, you'll have to sing a song at the end of this. We'll see. Yeah. So back to politics, I guess, a little bit is that, so there's this whole idea that a lot of the times these anti-centralist government arguments we talked about this already, obviously, leave people in jeopardy. They leave them in jeopardy. How do you, so someone like me who is a liberal that says like we need to be helping these people, and to me the way to do that is with an organized body like the government, and you're saying no, let's not doing that, let's leave that up to the people, and then the people, like rich people who can afford and get their hands and feet on the ground and help these programs, they aren't doing that. How do you justify that? Because to me, that's a troubling standpoint where you say, oh, well, it's not up to the government. I don't want to trust the government with that. I want to trust everyday people with money or who can afford to or lend their time or however you can help. How do you justify that? Because I'll wait for the second part of that question. So
well, I think, and I'll probably give you a bad answer. I think it's a combination, JJ. I think it's a mix. I'm not like a hardcore libertarian that doesn't believe government has any role in this. Government does have a role. The federal government has a role in most things. But I'm very much a federalist as well, though. I generally have always subscribed to the idea that the government that is closest to you is the government best able to help you. So I think state and local governments have a role. Private charities have a role. So to me, it's a mix, and we're constantly fighting about, right, how big of a government role and how big of a private sector role. But it's a mix, and you try to thread the needle, and you'll get people like me biased toward a little more private sector, and people like you will be biased toward more central government, and you try to find the middle.
So as if you want to believe that charities and smaller governments are going to be the trick for, and I agree to some extent that they would know each area better, like if in a perfect world, your private government would have enough money to solve that area's issues, because who knows it better than that? It's that's just a basic fundamental idea in the marketing that I do. It's obviously a very tangible idea. How do you get that to work? How do you get that to work in your system?
And I forget who said this. So we have the worst form of government in the world, but our government's better than any other form of government in the world. I botched that quote. Here's the point I'm trying to make. We got a lot of problems in this country. I believe in capitalism. I believe in free markets. I believe in generating wealth. And I don't know of another country in the history of the world that has made more people wealthy and provided more opportunity to everybody than this country. Now, you will nail me, JJ, because we still have gross inequality in this country. I'll give you that. But when you compare us to every other industrialized country in the world, the lower income levels in this country are better off than lower income people in any other country in the world. So the trick, JJ, is to use capitalism. And if you want to say use capitalism, let the wealthy get wealthy, but then tax the hell out of them because you want government to be more involved, fine. But I don't want to turn off the engine that is capitalism, because I think that makes everything go. And that makes government go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess I would say I think a lot of times we compare ourselves to other countries and say that and for us that's an excuse to be like, all right, well, we're better off, and so capitalism is working. But I also think that there is somewhere, I think that there are some socialist policies that are proposed to be put into place. I don't have any in mind specifically. I'm just saying in general.
Let me stop you for a minute, JJ. Let me stop you for a minute. Don't look at other countries. You tell me, and you've been on this planet not as long as I have, but in your shorter time on this planet, capitalism's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Free market is a good thing. I do think my biggest issue with capitalism, and not capitalism as a whole, but I think there are some gaps to be filled. And I think what I was going to say, when you push towards, I think socialism, this is another thing I kind of had in my mind that I want to talk to you about, is these terms that get coined and they then get villainized. And you have to coin them to make them easy to understand. But then on the flip side of that coin, you have people saying, oh, it's socialism. But I do think that like having some sort of support system, like a universal base income or something for people. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, then people are going to take advantage of that. But it's, once again, two sides of a coin. One side's worried about the people that take advantage of what something like a universal base income. And then the other side is more worried about scooping up all those and then taking in the risk that some people will take advantage of it. I mean, if you look at right now, the situation we have with what do you call it, unemployment, and how people are receiving unemployment, and a lot of fears are arising, I know, on the right side, especially of people who are like not coming back into low paid jobs because unemployment's actually paying them higher than
Well,
those.
there's some of that. Now, the right overplays that, but JJ, there is some of that.
Yeah. And I just wonder, is it better to worry about the people that are taking advantage of it, or worry about the people who are benefiting from it truly? You know, that's kind of my question.
It's a good way to look at it, JJ. I oppose the concept of universal basic income just philosophically. I don't believe government should ever directly support able-bodied Americans unless they have to, unless able-bodied Americans are in need. Like, I think it's much different for the government to provide direct support to older retire Americans who are no longer able to go out there and work. I just think incentive-wise, if we ever get to a place in this country where the government is directly giving money to able-bodied folks, I just think philosophically that's real problematic.
And that
whether
might be
it would work or not.
Yeah, right. And for you, that's probably part of one of those fundamental ideals that you have with like the American idea of like working your way up. But there, once again, always interrupt me if I'm putting words in your mouth. I hate to do that.
You're doing great.
But one thing, still with that argument, it's still, to me, there are people who are at a disadvantage in this country still. I'm not sure. I'm certain about. I'm personally certain about it. Some people don't believe that's true. That some people don't believe in another coined term that people seem to have a reject on is white privilege, and there is like there is a male privilege in this world, and I'm sure I know that I benefited from it. I benefited from my parents being middle to upper class, like all these different advantages that I've had to be able to be podcasting here from my bedroom. This is all stuff that I've benefited from. I think there is a population of people who could use a boost, and that boost would make them happier, put them in a better spot. And I think there's a fear that when you give someone this income, that everyone's just going to like all of a sudden relax and be like, well, I've made it. But I would also say there's studies in some smaller might be a key term here, socialist countries that where people are happier in general and they're more content with their lifestyle, and they do have just having those basic needs. Like maybe you're not giving them money, maybe you're giving them healthcare. The basic needs so that your day to day isn't fear of death.
JJ, it's you're raising great shit, man. I mean it. And for better or for worse, unlike some of those smaller, more socialist democratic countries, yeah, we're different. America is different. Our concept of freedom in this country is different than any European country. Our Constitution, our concept of rights, different in this country than any other country. This is a fascinating debate. I will just say that America, JJ, is moving more toward your concept of a free democratic socialist society, and it's certainly moving more away from, I believe, what our founders envisioned. That doesn't make me happy, but it should make you happy, because I think more Americans every year are thinking along the lines of what you're thinking.
Yeah. Well, that was a very skilled way to appease both of our arguments there. I appreciate that.
I'm losing the argument. Totally. JJ, I mean, look, I agree with you that, okay, I'll come right at you.
Yeah, come at me.
I'll say this as respectfully as I can, not about you. I don't care about income inequality. that'll be used in a campaign ad against me.
We don't have enough reach for that to
I don't care about
work.
income inequality. I care about opportunity. So, like, I'm okay with America being a free market capitalist society. And because I'm okay with that, JJ, I have to put up with inequality. It's a given. And I've got to put up with the fact that there will be low-income Americans. Now, I want to do whatever I can to address that inequality, but I don't want to prevent opportunity, and I don't want to prevent people from getting as wealthy as they want. I have to live with income inequality and try to figure out the best way I can help folks who are disadvantaged.
So I don't want to come across as getting attacking or anything like that, but
attack me. Come on, jerk. Attack me,
yeah,
JJ.
Yeah, that will be the trailer right there. We'll put a versus sign between us on the recording. Yeah. So do you really value someone like a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk?
God,
those
yeah.
are more than people who are living on the streets.
I value both.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to, as best as I can, I want Bezos to be able to do his thing, because I think Bezos in general does a lot of good, hires a lot of people, makes life really affordable for a lot of Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the magic. Look at us. Look at us right now on this podcast. I've got my phone right next to me. I mean, all of this technology, this is great shit. And people got wealthy because they developed this, created it, and created a shitload of jobs because of it. And cheap, inexpensive products because of it. That's beautiful. Don't stop that, but let's figure out what to do with the homeless guy living on the street.
Yeah, so if you're talking about raising that that keep using these catchphrases, I want to say it differently. Just raising that standard of life for some people who really need it. Does that really limit opportunity for people? Is that an issue? Even if we do it at a federal level, how is that an issue for opportunity?
I'm sorry, man. So you're still talking about sort of like universal basic income.
Or anything, any kind of federal program that would ease the lives of someone at the bottom. Because earlier we were talking.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of that, JJ, federal and state and local government programs to help people at the bottom. Maybe not enough for your liking, and that's constantly what we debate. But when you add up the federal, the state, and the local, we do governmentally in this country, we do a pretty decent job, can always be better. But government's not doing nothing.
Right. And right now I'm going to ask you to speak for the Republican Party, so bear with me.
Oh.
You're just the only person right now that has that insight. So it's just you and me. Yeah. But all right. So one issue that's very topical is that people are moving out of California to places like Arizona and Texas because of, well, they cite, obviously, excuse me. They cite high income taxes. They cite housing prices. They cite the homeless. And specifically in the case of the homeless, why I don't understand how we can say like, oh, we don't want to help, like as a Republican. Sorry, you're not a Republican, but a lot of Republicans are saying, oh, San Francisco needs to get their grips together and they need to get all the homeless people out, or whatever their argument is. Otherwise, all the rich people are going to leave. That seems like a counter argument to me to, I know your ideas are different. I got to keep clarifying that because I don't want to generalize you in a group, but how they can say that is, they can complain about one problem and then also complain about this problem and never do anything about either.
Well, I'm assuming that you still believe that some wealthy dude in California should be free to just say, the hell with it, I'm out of here and move to Utah, right?
Yeah, of course.
I do think, JJ, that again, there is a lot of that going on. It's not just California, it's the state I'm sitting in right now. No state in the country has lost population like Illinois over the last 20 years. New York is right behind it. And then California, for the first time, California is losing a congressional seat. And you're right. People are leaving to wealthier people, but not just wealthy people. Middle class people are leaving to more tax friendly states. That's not the only reason. So to me, JJ, that is a wake up call to, the governments of, say, California and San Francisco. They got a problem. People are leaving. Wealthier people are leaving. Their tax base is shrinking. If I'm a Democrat in California, I want to figure out an answer for that. Don't you?
Yeah. And so let's bring it to that even a more specific issue than I've been general. That's my fault. Let's talk about homeless populations. What is your way to deal with that specifically?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, clearly we need, again, a mix of government and private sector programs to help the homeless get on their feet, help the homeless deal with their alcohol and or drug issues, help the homeless find work. And while we're doing that, JJ, and hopefully we're doing that, my God, we have to open our arms to house the homeless wherever and however we can. I don't believe personally that communities and states and localities should just say fuck you and kick homeless out and make homelessness almost illegal.
So what's your take?
Unwelcome. I don't think that's the answer.
Yeah. So what's your take on a place like Seattle, who a lot of people accuse of being too friendly to the homeless and saying they're giving them to, and I don't agree with that personally, but I think whatever they need, but go ahead.
I on this one, JJ, I'm probably closer to you than you would have guessed. I hear that a lot from people on my side, that cities like Seattle are making it too friendly and cozy for homeless people. I don't think that's a huge issue. I worry more about crime. I worry about not just homelessness leading to crime. There are other reasons why cities like Portland and Seattle are having people leave. Again, taxpayers are leaving. And if I'm a Democrat running Portland, I'm trying to figure out, why is this? Am I allowing these protesters too much freedom? Have I been doing that? Am I tying the hands of police officers too much? Do we have way too many homeless people on our streets? You can say, JJ, because you're a good progressive, fuck all of that, ignore all of that, but people are leaving Portland and businesses are leaving Portland and Seattle. So it's a problem.
Yeah, there's got to be a central ground there, though. And are people leaving Portland and Seattle? I haven't heard that.
Yeah. Yes. Long time. And I wish I read a great article last week, and I don't have solid numbers for you. But like California, Portland and Seattle, I don't know that they're leaving the states, but they're people who've lived in the city, both of those cities for a long time, are getting out.
All right. Yeah.
They're attributing it less to the homelessness and more to crime.
Yeah. It's obviously a tough issue. I'm a huge anti-advocate for what do you call that? Anti-homeless infrastructure, where they build places that you can't. They build those spikes under highways so that homeless can't camp there and sleep there. I think that stuff is pretty. I think that's someone in politics saying, yeah, there's a problem. We're just gonna sweep it to the side.
But as a good progressive, JJ, if you are uber friendly to the homeless, and over time you get gobs and gobs of good, decent homeless people coming to, live in your city, and it becomes a problem, what do you do, my friend?
Well, I guess I would aim my activism more in the approach of like government programs to help them. That's kind of, I guess, the fundamental of our argument right here is that my votes would start going towards more resources for homeless people to get showers and jobs and to learn how to interview and those kinds of things. So my support would go into the government giving resources for them, whether it be state, whatever government comes up with a solution first, that's where I would give my vote, So that's kind of how I would put my efforts in that regard. And I know, like you said, free country, move wherever you want. But as a libertarian, you're saying it's less up to the federal government and smaller. You want to push things out of government, right? And so,
well, but in a situation like that, JJ, that's up to the government of Portland. Maybe some state help, but if Portland has a burgeoning homelessness problem, that's up to the city and the taxpayers of Portland to figure out what they want to do about it.
Do you think in a lot of I get what you're saying. Do you think in a lot of situations there is an issue in any voting situation? There is an issue with the detachment from the situation that's being voted upon. So when I think of that question, I think of like inner city issues with lacks of education and huge dropout rates, or underprivileged like beginnings as children, and like with social workers, especially is one I've been exposed to, social workers who have hundreds of cases and can't care for their social cases. And that's a government platform to do good by the government, but it's underfunded and that kind of thing. I just totally blanked out where I was going with that question.
No, JJ, yeah. Let me pick up where you were going, because I think I know where you were going, and I like where you were going. I think here's part of the problem, and it goes with your issue of detachment. Because we have so expanded our federal government over the last 130 years, and we've asked our federal government to do so much. I think perversely, and I think we see this in the data, we ask less of individual Americans to help those less fortunate. Churches and nonprofits and charities and neighborhoods now do not do as much for the less fortunate among us, because what the hell? Washington, it's all of my tax dollars going to Washington, D.C., they ought to fix it. We've seen that. And so people then become detached. I think people volunteered more back in the day. I think state and local governments and charities were much more proactive back in the day. I think, JJ, and maybe you disagree, we farmed a lot of this shit off to the federal government, and a lot of our local institutions have developed entropy. They're not as involved anymore, and people have gotten detached.
I would tend to disagree with that one, but I'm purely disagreeing off of feelings. So but my involvement, my involvement with this is that my perspective on this is that with social media and much more tangible ways to be engaged with involvement in your community and reach outside of your community for involvement, and programs kind of evolving out of that, and businesses having to worry about a triple bottom line these days because of social media and the accountability they're held by social media. I think that activism is at an all-time high, and I just don't think it's enough. It's
not. You're in a skewed world, man. You're a young progressive activist. Mm-hmm. You look at the data, JJ. Americans are not as active and do not volunteer nearly as much as they did.
So do you think that's due to a lack of education in the issues that are actually pressing our country then?
Well, it's been this way. There's been a steady erosion over the last 40 years.
Sure.
So it's been this way for a while, and I think, and I could be wrong, JJ, maybe it's my own bias, I think as we've asked government to do more, we've asked less of the rest of us. Mm-hmm. Just something to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see the data on that. You and
I are going to stay in touch. We'll keep this conversation going. I promise.
I hope so. And Joe, I feel like we've reached kind of the time that I told you. If you want to stay on, you can, but we are at an hour, so you actually exceeded my expectations.
Awesome.
So
I'm hungry. I got to go, but JJ, I'd love to do this again. You're great.
Cool. And I'd love to have the other guys on at some point too with you. What's for dinner?
Spaghetti, baby. Spaghetti.
Hell yeah. Spaghetti for dinner. Love it. It's a good Thursday night. I appreciate you being on, Joe. I've had a good time talking to you, and I appreciate your honesty and willingness to answer my questions. So,
hey, JJ, thank you, and make sure stay on me. Let me know how I can help you promote this episode.
Sure, absolutely. Have a good night. Enjoy your spaghetti.
Thanks, man. Thanks, JJ.
Yep. Thank you.